Thanks for joining us on Tandem Radio for a very special segment, By Design, focused on helping you understand how God designed you so that you may be healthy and productive in fulfilling God's purposes in your life for many years to come. Now let's join our host, health expert and public speaker, Dr. James Proodian.
Welcome to the By Design radio program. My name is Dr. James Proodian of Proodian Healthcare and ProodianHealthcare.com, where health literacy is the key to longevity. And as long as God has us on this side of eternity, my show is designed to educate you and your families to feel better, function better, and live as many quality disease-free years as possible. Last week, we started the foundational subject matter of nutrition. The show is divided into foundational subjects and topical subjects. We're going to be spending a bunch of weeks on nutrition as a foundation. And the goal of nutrition is not right now to get into what is specific for you. For instance, if you're gluten sensitive, should you be eating bread, or what should you be drinking soy milk versus regular milk? Right now, we're just spending some time on the basic building blocks of clinical nutrition, which are the 5 essentials to life. We talked about last time: protein, carbohydrates, fats, vitamins, minerals, and water. The 5 essentials to human existence. Without one of them, we wouldn't be here. So the subject matter is relatively simple when we look at those 5 tools that were given to us by God, and how man has polluted and toxified protein, carbohydrates, fats, vitamins, minerals, and water into not only a big money-making machine, but also a major leading cause of chronic illness are the types of foods and the poor standard American diet. Luke 1:37, for with God nothing is impossible, and nothing is impossible through the work that we do through education, so that we could transform people into making better decisions with the choices that they're making at the supermarket, at the restaurants, and in the kitchen. So where we left off last time was we outlined the first one, which was protein. We talked about how protein is an essential building block for muscular development and for performance. So our bodies are designed, you want to be in a state of growth, and protein is designed to give us repair while we rest. So those protein actually build, they're building blocks. So every 3 to 4 hours, we want to be taking in some type of quality protein. And that protein could be in the source of meat, chicken, eggs. These are typical forms of protein. Now, I'm not suggesting you eat those types of foods. I'm just giving you examples of the type of food that protein is found in. And protein, which are made up of amino acids, those amino acids are the essential building blocks of human life. So that is what protein is. And we're going to push it off to the side. We're going to remember it, because we're going to come back to it as these shows try to connect the dots about the choices that we're making, and making better choices in the ways that we're eating. Let's move on to carbohydrates. Like I said last time, carbohydrates could be a bit confusing. There's 2 types of carbohydrate in terms of cellular structure. There are simple carbohydrates, which are fruits and vegetables, and there are complex carbohydrates, which are things like rice and bread, wheat, pasta, for instance, or complex forms of carbohydrate. The difference is simple carbohydrates give us energy in the short term, where complex carbohydrates can provide energy, sustained energy, over a long period of time. So you guys are smart people out there. If you're about to enter into an athletic event, and let's say it's about an hour before your event, would you choose to eat a simple carbohydrate or a complex carbohydrate? Well, the answer, I'm sure you guessed, is simple, because that's going to give us the immediate energy supply. It's going to turn directly into glucose in our bloodstream. Glucose is the primary sugar that all of the sugars are converted to, which is the thing that gives us energy. So an apple, for instance, before an hour or so, or half an hour before a race, is a really good idea. And I'm not going to get into food timing, but I'm just giving you an illustration of the way carbohydrates work. They give us energy. Now, sugar is the primary carbohydrate. So whether it be maltose, sucrose, fructose, galactose, all of the oses, O-S-E at the end of a word, means that it's a sugar. And the sugars come from a variety of foods. Sucrose, which is table sugar. To give you an idea, we used to eat about 15 to 20 pounds of table sugar per person per year in our country about 70 years ago. We're up to 150 pounds of table sugar per person per year. And what's interesting about sugar or carbohydrates is actually sugar is the leading cause of obesity in our culture, not fat. Sugar is. So the way we're consuming sugar, the way sugar has been put into so many processed man-made foods, wasn't actually God's intent. Whereas fructose, which is sugar from fruits and vegetables, right? Fructose is found primarily in fruit. Now when we look at the way fruit is digested, and fruit is a great source of simple carbohydrate and energy. So if you had the choice between, let's say, a candy bar or an apple, why would we not hesitate to eat the apple? Number one, it's much healthier for us. We're going to get a better source, a much better source of simple carbohydrate out of an apple than we would a candy bar, which is loaded full of sucrose. And the reason that's so important, years ago, maybe some of you remember a great book written called The Sugar Blues. And that book was great, and I read it probably back in 1985 or 87. It's a book that illustrates why children, for instance, if you feed them sugar at a birthday party, they're all bouncing off the wall because of that sugar high. In about a half an hour, they all crash. And that crash has to do with the insulin, which is adjusting. The pancreas secretes the insulin. It's adjusting against the amount of sugar that's circulating in the bloodstream. And if we didn't have the insulin to counterbalance that sugar, we would go into a diabetic coma or possibly die. So the amount of carbohydrate or simple sugar floating around our bloodstream is essential to our overall performance. Because remember the illustration I gave you last week. I'm looking at all of us as highly supercharged Ferraris. We're not going to put diesel fuel or dirty fuel into a Ferrari. We're going to put high quality food into these amazing bodies that God has designed for us. So if the choice of carbohydrate is very important, and that choice of carbohydrate is not only on a simple front, but also a complex carbohydrate front. So if you had the choice between regular macaroni and whole wheat macaroni or spinach macaroni, or if we were to eat the inside of a potato, like mashed potatoes, versus a baked potato. Now the outside of the potato and the skin is where all the nutrients are. We have to become better educated in making those decisions. So when we look at white bread versus whole wheat bread, you choose the whole wheat bread. And again, I'm not telling you how to eat. I'm just giving you the background of the 5 essentials of life and why there's good, there's bad, and there's really ugly forms of protein, carbohydrates, and yes, now fats. I don't think there's been a human substance, other than carbohydrates maybe, that has just been so beaten up in the literature that we see on the news every day that we should not be consuming fats. There's low-fat diets, there's non-fat diets, there's no-fat food, there's fat food. It makes my head spin off. Fat is an essential ingredient to human existence. Now, the source of fat, that's where the story changes. I mean, we could be eating Crisco, or we could be eating extra virgin olive oil. There's a big difference. They're both under the category of fat, but one of them, hydrogenated corn oil, is one of the worst products that we could put into our body. It's made by a guy in a laboratory, where extra virgin olive oil is very good for us in the proper amount. So fat, just to again give you why it's important, there are a variety of fats, saturated, unsaturated, polyunsaturated. It's essential for long-term energy. Fat gives us energy, a little bit differently than the way carbohydrates do, but our bodies store fat that when we run out of or start to utilize all those carbohydrate storages, we start to utilize fat, burn fat. Adipose tissue is then converted into an energy source. Now, it's necessary for body composition. We have to have fat on our body. Women carry around more body fat than men do, and that's because they give birth and they have various body parts that require more fat. So having body fat on us is an essential component to good, proper health. A male athlete, for instance, will be between 12 to 15% body fat. A female athlete is going to be a little bit more, about 18% or so. In that range. Healthy fat body composition is very important to know where you might stack up. And there are some really cool scales nowadays. Back in school, we had to do underwater weigh-ins to figure out what body fat was. Nowadays, there's some very cool, sophisticated scales that could tell you more or less, plus or minus 2 or 3%, what body fat you are. And the reason that that's important, guys, is that the scale is important, but not really that important. You take the middle linebacker of a professional football team, and you do his height and his weight, which is how you calculate BMI. A lot of those folk are going to come in clinically obese because BMI doesn't do a good job in measuring the density of the structure. So muscle weighs more than fat, and somebody who's highly muscular may have a high BMI but low body fat. So we have to be careful on how we use BMI. That's just a little side note. So fat in the form of corn oil versus olive oil, again, those are your choices. You want to choose good, healthy fats in your pantry. Flaxseed oil, for instance, is a wonderful source of fat. Whereas margarine, which was made in a laboratory in 1970 by some guy named Bob, versus butter. Now, I'm not saying butter is great for us, but at least my body recognizes the cellular makeup of butter. It does not recognize the cellular makeup of margarine. Margarine is a trans fat, causes cancer. Where fats will continue, bottle dressing versus good old oil and vinegar mixed up in a bottle. You know, a baked potato with butter and sour cream versus a baked potato with a half a teaspoon of olive oil. So we want to use olive oil, flaxseed oil. I always make a joke. I see we all go out to fancy dinners and they pour the olive oil on the plate for the bread, but at home we use butter. Use the olive oil around your house. Use healthy oils. Get it, and really start focusing on the quality of the oil you're going to buy, along with the quality of the carbohydrate and the quality of the protein. Next week we're going to get into vitamins, minerals, water, and really start digging in deeper into the subject matter of clinical nutrition. You've been listening to the By Design radio program, and thank you for joining me, Dr. James Proodian, for this episode. If you'd like more information about me and Proodian Healthcare, please go to ProodianHealthcare.com. It is spelled Proodian, and feel free to submit any questions you have for me for the show. Have a blessed week. Thanks for listening, and talk to you soon.
You've been listening to By Design with Dr. James Proodian of Proodian Healthcare. To learn more, visit us at tandemradio.com, that's tandemradio.com, or on Facebook. And don't forget to email us with your questions. We'd love to hear from you. In the meantime, hope you have a healthy week, and we look forward to you joining us next time for more fantastic insights from Dr. James Proodian on By Design, a special production of Tandem Radio.